Let's explore more, even more autistic history and the Autism Wars. This is part 101 of a series. So I'm going to pick back up where I left off and reading an article that was published in 2006, November 26, 2006, by Thomas H. Maudh II. It was titled Bernard Rimland 78, author was the father of modern autism research, and this was in the Los Angeles Times, and I have read about half of it already in the previous video, and we left off with their life changed dramatically with the birth of their son Mark in 1956. Mark was a difficult, nearly unmanageable child. When Mark was 2, Rimland used one of his wife's college textbooks to diagnose him as autistic, a diagnosis soon confirmed by their pediatrician. Despite his doctorate in psychology, Rimland had never heard of autism before, and he plunged into the scientific literature. The medical community, based largely on the work of behavioral scientist Bruno Bettelheim, still blamed mothers for the disorder. Knowing that his wife was not cold and distant, Rimland began looking for an alternative explanation, visiting libraries throughout the country, interviewing doctors, and taking copious notes. When I started my quest, autism was no less than an obsession, he later wrote. I quickly read everything I could find on this subject and hungered for more. This was war. After 5 years of research, he had a massive stack of papers. His wife told him he didn't have a research paper, but a book. The 1964 book was initially ignored by the medical establishment, but was highly popular with psychology students. More important, it was a hit with parents of autistic children, and they soon began bombarding him with letters and phone calls. After a day of work for the Navy, he would spend evenings and weekends responding to the inquiry. So many parents have stories about calling him and talking for 2 or 3 hours, Grossman said. He always had encouraging remarks, and he always had very good advice. In 1967, he started what is now known as the Autism Research Institute, which still resides in a modest storefront on Adams Avenue in the Kensington area of San Diego. The office is stacked with books, newsletters, videos, boxes of research papers, and piles of correspondence. After he retired from the Navy 23 years ago, Rimland spent all his time in the office, except for the weeks he traveled the world, preaching the gospel of autism research and therapy. I had not read this all the way through yet and did not know that was right there. Preaching the gospel of autism research and therapy. You understand the power of the belief system. It's even showing up in neurotypical writing of Bernard Rimland. So, yeah, there's that. Alright, it says the official office hours were 8 a.m. to noon, but Rimland was there afternoons, evenings, and weekends, talking to parents, writing reports, organizing conferences, working on books, and answering the questions of reporters. And on one wall of the office is a poster for the Oscar-winning film Rain Man, which highlighted autism for a public that was largely unaware of the disorder. Rimland served as a technical advisor for the film, and Dustin Hoffman modeled his performance in part on Mark Rimland. Of course, that's the son of Bernard Rimland. The papers truly represent one man's life work, Grossman said. If he had any other interests other than his family, he never talked about it. special interest much. In addition to his wife, Rimland is survived by his son Mark, now a well-known autist, another son Paul, and a daughter Helen. So that there was what the Los Angeles Times had published in their newspaper at the time about Bernard Rimland on his passing. So now let's take a look at Wikipedia, and where we see some specifics that go past this. Now, remember, this was 2006 when that article was published, so a lot of the truth of Defeat Autism Now is not going to come out until later, so that's definitely not included in this at that time. Alright, so to reiterate, Bernard Rimland was born November 15th, 1928, and he passed November 21st, 2006. He was an American research psychologist, writer, lecturer, and influential person in the field of developmental disorders. His first book, Infantile Autism, sparked by the birth of a son who had autism, was instrumental in changing attitudes towards the disorder. Rimland founded and directed 2 advocacy groups, remember, the Autism Society of America and the Autism Research Institute, and he promoted several since disproven theories about causes and treatment of autism, including denial of vaccines, facilitated communication, chelation therapy, and false claims of a link between secretin and autism. He also supported the ethically controversial practice of using aversives on autistic children. So I'm going to read parts of it because the other information covered so much of this already, but it says here in 65, Rimland co-founded the Autism Society of America, ASA, a parent advocacy organization to work on behalf of autistic children and their families at local, state, and national levels. So there was always politics and things involved in autism organizations, of course. And in 67, Rimland left the ASA to establish the Autism Research Institute, ARI, in San Diego, and he was dedicated to researching and collecting data on autism and related disorders. He kept a database of research and case histories, as well as conducted and sponsored research in an attempt to identify the cause of autism and offer effective treatment solutions. Rimland supported applied behavioral analysis, ABA, a systematic educational approach made popular by Ivar Lovaas. He published an ARI newsletter which reached an international audience. In '88, he served as a technical advisor again on the movie set of Rain Man. And Defeat Autism Now, Dan, established in 1995, where he brought together parents, clinicians, and researchers to explore and establish effective biomedical interventions. Stance on key issues section states Rimland was outspoken on what he believed to be the major causes for autism: environmental pollutants, antibiotics, and the vaccines. Sometimes this put him at odds, with the established medical community. In a letter to the editor of Washington Post in 1997, Rimland wrote, "The reason that the public and Congress supports alternative medicine is that conventional medicine, despite its arrogance, is far too ineffective, far too harmful, and far too costly. Non-conventional medicine is a rational alternative to a much greater evil, conventional medicine." All right, I'm going to share more about Bernard Rimland's history coming up and some of the testimony that he gave at autism hearings back in the late 90s and in 2000 in regards to the Wakefield era of vaccines and ABA.